Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Nathan Street with Carolina Conservatives, Preachers with a Punch. So glad to join with you here as we are getting ready to head into the Thanksgiving season. And man, do we have a lot to be thankful for, a lot to thank the Lord for. And one of those being the top being our families. You know, if we lose everything on this earth, we have the Lord Jesus Christ living in our hearts, and we have our families to be there with us. So this is definitely a time for us to just reflect back and to be thankful to the Lord for the families that he has given us here on this earth. Even if you don't get along with them too well, even if some of them are liberals and you want to fight with them over Thanksgiving turkey, it's all right. Go ahead and fight with them over the Thanksgiving turkey, but still love them nonetheless. It is very important that we do so. But speaking of families, this bill that has now been given the green light to pursue forward with the help of 12 Republicans, Democrats and 12 Republicans, going to shove down the country's throat, Respect for Marriage Act, which is nothing but respect. It is a disrespect. It is a disregard of marriage, which has been for centuries, for millennia, defined as between a man and a woman. So for the United States Senate, and especially 12 Republicans, for you to stand up there and for you to call this a Respect for Marriage Act or Respect of Marriage Act is a spit in the very face of God himself, who has defined marriage as between a man and a woman. You, sir, ma'am, you will stand before God and answer for degrading and denigrating what he has observed and what he has called sanctified, which is marriage. Now, let me just say this. I have a little bit of a different opinion when it comes to marriage, and I want everyone to just bear with me and understand this here, that marriage, even though you sign a marriage certificate, even though that you get legal recognition for that marriage certificate, we in the United States of America and in a lot of other countries around the world do this wholly incorrectly. We should never have the government involved in our marriages at all. It is not the government's responsibility. It is not their place at all to be involved in marriage. Why we must have a license to get married and why it must be recognized by the state is beyond me. It is not the state's responsibility. It is not their call. We should be able to marry in the eyes of God through the church and only through the church. Now, but Dr. Street, doesn't that mean then that a man still would be able to marry a man or a woman still be able to marry a woman in the United States if we did it that way? Well, with the lily-livered, panty-waisted, pansy-feeted pastors that we've got here in the United States and some of these churches that recognize that, probably so. That would probably be the case. But it would be the responsibility of that church to then stand before God, that pastor whose responsibility it actually is for recognizing that marriage and that church for recognizing that marriage. It would then be their responsibility in the eyes of God. It is not the state's responsibility. So I'm saying not only if we were to have respect for marriage in this country, the respect for marriage that the state could have could only be one way, and that is to get out of marriage entirely. You have no place there. Get out of it. This is a covenant. And if we want separation of church and state, like they always claim that they want, which they don't really, what they want is state controlling the church, not there actually being separation of church and state. But if we truly did want separation of church and state, then we would ask the state to get out of the marriage business entirely. We would not allow them to be a part of it. This is a covenant. It's always been a covenant. It's always been described as a covenant, and a covenant is inherently religious. So when the state is involved in a covenant, the state is injecting itself into a religious precept and a religious act. And so therefore there is a blurring of the lines between religion and state, once again, right here. And so this covenant is between a man and a woman and God. That's it. No one else. And the church is there to recognize, to carry out, and to witness in this covenant relationship between a man, a woman, and God. No one else. That's the responsibility of the church. That's the responsibility of the pastor, to actually marry those two people in the eyes of God. Because that's what we say when we take those vows. They are in the presence, in the eyes of God. God joins with the man and the woman to become a part of that marriage. That is the very idea and the very definition of marriage, which is why some churches, not only will some churches not marry a man and a man or a woman and a woman, some churches will not marry unbelievers, because they fully believe and carry out and act on that unbelievers should not be unequally yoked. A believer and an unbeliever should not be unequally yoked. There are a lot of churches who will not even marry people who are not in their congregations, which is a way to protect themselves, honestly. And probably churches are going to have to start moving toward that to protect themselves more. But it is this respect for marriage act, which I'm going to call the denigration of marriage act, the slap in the face of God over marriage act. It is in this that we've got Republicans who have decided that they are going to join with Democrats, and that they are going to vote along with Democrats to actually bring forth this disrespect and denigration of marriage act. And so there are some things that are very important to know, and one of those is that that we need to understand who those Republicans are who actually voted for this. Now, it's very sad that we have to call out people who are supposedly conservative. They call themselves conservative when they actually are not conservative. Now, some of those are from conservative states, for example. We've got Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia that is wholly conservative, went completely red for in the 2020 election. And Shelley Moore Capito, you should be ashamed. And those of you in West Virginia, you should vote out Shirley Moore Capito by all means necessary. Vote her out. She has no business being there. Susan Collins, we understand Susan Collins, where she's coming from in Maine. We understand her doing something stupid like this because Susan Collins is the very epitome of a rhino. She is a liberal through and through. Rob Portman, who pretends to be a conservative, he's on his way out. He doesn't really care. He's got a child who's gay. So because my child is gay, I'm going to support the gay marriage. Sorry, Senator Portman. The Bible is still true whether your child is gay or not. The Bible is still true. It is still sin. And even when your child is gay, you should still stand against that sin. There's a couple I'm going to come back to, but Senator Blunt, Roy Blunt of Missouri being a very conservative state, but will retire at the end of this term. So he's like, I don't care anymore. I'll vote the way that I really wanted to. I want to be a rhino. So that's what I'm going to be. Senator Cynthia Lummis of Wyoming really surprises me. If there is a more conservative state in the United States than Wyoming, I would be hard-pressed to find it. Senator Lummis needs to be voted out, Wyoming. You need to vote her out. This is unbelievable that somebody like that would actually, from a state like Wyoming, would actually vote to have this legalized. Senator Murkowski, no big surprise. She is a liberal through and through. She should be, hopefully, Alaska will get some sense about it and get rid of her very, very soon. Mitt Romney, who is a member of the Mormon Church, which, the Mormon Church, I don't really hold to that the Mormons are Christian at all. They're actually a cult. But the Mormons are indeed very, very conservative for the most part, and extremely conservative when it comes to marriage. Mitt Romney should not only be drummed out of the Senate, when it comes time to be for a re-election, but he should also be drummed out of the church. I really, hopefully, will see the Mitt Romney being excommunicated from his own church over this. He deserves nothing less. Dan Sullivan has always said that he is going to support a constitutional amendment. When he first ran for the Senate, voiced support for a constitutional amendment banning same-sex marriage, banning it. So he ran for Senate saying he would ban same-sex marriage. Then he gets in the Senate and votes for it. The very definition of a liar and a hypocrite. Dan Sullivan should be ousted from the Senate. In Alaska, again, Alaska, you got two humdingers, but I'm not going to say much because North Carolina does too. We're going to get to them in just a minute. Todd Young of Indiana, another very conservative state, voted in 2016, voted support of an amendment that upheld former President Obama's executive order banning discrimination based on sex orientation or gender identity for federal contractors. Todd Young is a spineless jellyfish, to say the least. Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, another state who is definitely lurching to the right over the last several years. She's always a waffler. She's always going on CNN with hat in hand, always begging the liberals to like her. And so this is Joni Ernst's way of saying, please, please, Democrats and liberals, like me, love me. I've got to be liked. I've got to be loved. So I'm going to do this. And hopefully you will like me and love me. And they're just going to spit back in her face and say, screw you. You got an R after your name. So we don't really want to like you or love you. So that's Joni Ernst, though, for you. She always wants to be liked and loved. Now, let's come to North Carolina, my home state of North Carolina. Senator Richard Burr and Senator Thom Tillis, both of North Carolina, voted to support this bill. First of all, Richard Burr, the criminal, will go on his way out, so he doesn't really care. But Senator Burr is nothing but a huge disgrace and a disappointment to the state of North Carolina. And I hope Senator Burr sees this. You know, you use the Senate for your own financial gain, as it appears, as you were making your stock trades. So apparently you got everything that you needed from this country and from the Senate. So you're on your way out. And that's, we couldn't be better for it, for you being on your way out. Hopefully we get somebody, like Ted Budd's going to come in and be a whole lot better in the Senate than you. But Senator Burr, I hope you see this. Thank you for nothing. You've been nothing in the United States Senate for this long. You've been nothing but a huge disappointment and a disgrace to the North Carolinians. And I hope you go down in history, continuing to take the Burr name down in history. And I hope you go down in history as a stain on the face of North Carolina. But now you're not nearly as bad as Thom Tillis. Thom Tillis, who I think is probably the dumbest senator in the United States Senate, unfortunately has an R after his name. North Carolina GOP, I am calling on you right now. North Carolina GOP, right now, I am calling on you to censor Thom Tillis. You need to stand up and grow a spine, GOP. North Carolina GOP, Michael Whatley, you need to censor Thom Tillis immediately, because Thom Tillis is doing nothing but going his own way. Whatever suits his fancy and whatever lines his pockets, that's what Thom Tillis is going to do. And so Thom Tillis, a genuine hypocrite, a liar personified. Thom Tillis, you disgust me. You disgust the citizens of North Carolina. And you disgust the Christians in North Carolina. Your rear end's in a sling, buddy, when it comes time for your reelection. And I hope we get somebody with some guts that's going to stand up and vote this idiot out of office for once and for all. Thom Tillis, it's time for you to go. Do us a favor in North Carolina. Do us a favor and just go ahead and resign, because you're nothing but a disgrace, a stain on North Carolina. Michael Whatley, please do what's right and at least censor this dummy, so that he understands that we in North Carolina, especially the GOP, do not stand with him in this at all. So, folks, this is what we're up against. We're up against liars. We're up against Democrats and lying Republicans. This is what Democrats do well, actually. I applaud them. The Democrats, they walk in lockstep over issues. Whatever Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and Obama and Biden, whatever they say, they walk in lockstep. They get behind it. There are a few exceptions, like Kirsten Sinema, who will definitely support this because she's bisexual, and you got Tammy Baldwin, who is also bisexual or who is openly gay, which is, to me, should be disqualifying. They should have to actually recuse themselves because they are supporters of this. And I would also say those who are in traditional marriage, who are in biblically defined marriage, should recuse themselves as well because they've got a stake in the game. So everybody should recuse themselves of this, and it shouldn't even be brought up before the Senate. Again, the state should not be involved in this at all. But with very few exceptions, Kirsten Sinema sometimes, Joe Manchin, when it suits his fancy, sometimes will actually vote against the Democrat stake in this. But for the most part, they walk in lockstep. They're afraid to step out of line. Republicans, not so much. What are you doing, Mitch McConnell? What are you doing to get Republicans on the same side of this? What are you going to do to ensure that the Republicans' message gets out, that what we want to happen gets out? Of course, I don't think that you're really all that either, Mitch McConnell. I think you're probably just there to make sure that the Bush machine continues rolling right on and rolling in the dough and making yourself rich as well. It's time, folks, for us to get some real Republicans. It's time for us to get some real conservatives. Let me put it that way. Get some real conservatives, because we recently have seen a really great woman in Tulsi Gabbard. Now, I know Tulsi Gabbard does not believe the right way in everything, but she does believe that we should have the right as Americans to abide by the Constitution. And so that is, I applaud her for that. But we've got to do something about this. First of all, we've got to pray. We've got to ensure that the church is safe in this. So I'm going to say this to you, churches. Are you, churches, if it comes down to it, pastors, if it comes down to it, that the state says either you will abide by this ruling or you will lose your tax-exempt status, are you willing to lose your tax-exempt status? It's going to be the real question there. So are you willing to lose your tax-exempt status over this? So we've got to be praying, folks. We've got to be standing in the gap. We've got to be the ones who say we're not going to stand idly by and let this garbage go on, because we certainly don't have real conservatives out there who are willing to stand with us on this. So, Respect for Marriage Act? No, it's not. It is really in most cases, it is not a Respect for Marriage Act. It is a disrespect of marriage and a denigration of marriage act. So, folks, that's what we're up against. It's time for us to hit our knees, because that's when we're strongest. Let's pray that God will intervene here, because really what the state says on this doesn't matter. It's what God says on this. God bless y'all. This is Dr. Nathan Street, Carolina Conservatives Preachers with a Punch, talking about the Respect for Marriage Act. We wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your families. Pray often. Don't eat too much. And get a lot of good rest, because we've got some battles to fight. God bless you.